Okay, let's start with a pretty striking statistic. Africa, right? 19% of the world's population lives there.
Yeah, huge.
But they consume only, what, just over 3% of global electricity?
That's right, 3.1%. And it means over 600 million people currently don't have access to electricity.
Wow. 600 million? That's about 75% of everyone globally without power.
Exactly. It's a massive challenge, obviously, but also, framed as this huge opportunity,
Right.
especially with renewables.
Which brings us to Mission 300.
This big initiative from the World Bank Group and the African Development Bank.
The goal being connecting 300 million Africans to electricity by 2030, mostly renewable focus.
That's the headline, yeah. Sounds bold, sounds positive. But the policy paper we're looking at today,
From the Africa Research Center for Climate and Environmental Justice.
that's the one. It raises some, well, pretty pointed questions about how effective this mission really is and maybe what the underlying goals are.
Right. So our mission today, for you listening, is to kind of cut through those headlines. We want to scrutinize Mission 300 using this critical analysis.
Yeah, look at the nuances, the potential pitfalls that maybe aren't immediately obvious.
And explore what it all means for Africa's development path and maybe, for global aid initiatives more broadly. So the paper kicks off by challenging the idea that Mission 300 is entirely new, doesn't it? What's the core argument there?
It really does. It makes this pretty striking claim that Mission 300 largely just repackages existing World Bank projects.
Repackages. So old stuff made to look new.
Kind of. It points to specific initiatives like Ethiopia's Elite program.
All right.
These already have, documented histories, implementation issues, high costs sometimes.
But they're being presented as fresh solutions now.
That's what the paper argues, yeah.
Yeah.
Without maybe a full, fresh look at how they actually performed in the past.
That's a significant point to make right at the start. Does the paper suggest then, if it's repackaging, is there another motive beyond just connecting homes?
It absolutely suggests that. The analysis puts forward the idea that this repackaging might also be about, well, positioning foreign businesses.
How so?
To sort of cash in on Africa's growing renewable energy market. It mentions China already has a foothold,
Right.
but argues the World Bank's model, which relies over 90% on loans and imports,
90%. Wow.
is, and I think this is a direct quote or close to it, not different and indeed worse.
Worse. Why worse?
Because, the argument goes, it could deepen Africa's industrial underdevelopment. It favors foreign companies, foreign tech, and doesn't really build up local capacity.
Okay, so it's about the source of the technology and the funding model. And what about the type of access people get? The paper seemed concerned about that too.
Yes, definitely. Under this sort of market-driven approach, the paper highlights that for many rural communities, the plan seems to be basic, standalone mini-solar systems.
Which sounds okay on the surface, maybe. Better than nothing.
Well, yes, but the critique is that these systems often only provide really rudimentary power. Enough for, a few lights, maybe charging a phone.
Not enough for, say, industry or bigger appliances.
Exactly. Not the kind of power needed for broader economic development. Plus, the paper argues these solutions, sold at market rates, can actually be prohibitively expensive for the very communities they're meant to help.
So you connect people, technically, but it's limited power and it might be too costly anyway.
That's the concern raised, yeah, that it kind of perpetuates a state of underdevelopment rather than overcoming it.
And this ties back to the funding model, the loans. The paper was pretty blunt about debt traps.
Very blunt. It argues this heavy reliance on loans, often with various middlemen involved, risks trapping African nations in, deeper cycles of debt.
Were there examples given?
Yes, it goes back to that Ethiopia Elite project. Connecting 8 million people costs something like $677 million.
Okay.
And the paper points out the cost per kilowatt of solar power there was roughly double the African market average at the time.
Yeah. Double. That immediately raises questions about efficiency, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And Nigeria's electrification program is another example cited. Costs per watt were 2 to 3 times market price.
And did it work? Did more people get electricity?
Well, here's the kicker. The paper states the number of Nigerians without electricity actually increased during that project's time frame.
Increased.
Okay.
That's counterintuitive, to say the least.
It really underscores the paper's point about the financial burden and sometimes, frankly, the limited real-world impact despite the huge sums involved.
This leads into a really strong claim in the paper that these projects promote a neo-colonial economic system. And what do they mean by that?
Well, essentially a modern form of economic control where external interests kind of maintain dominance. even if it looks like aid or development.
So how does that play out with Mission 300, according to the analysis?
The paper points out that Africa has, 30% of the global minerals needed for clean energy tech? Huge solar potential, wind potential.
Right, the resources are there.
Absolutely. But Mission 300, as analyzed in this paper, seems to have no significant plans baked in for building local industrial capacity for renewables.
No factories for solar panels or turbines built locally.
Or even serious technology transfer components. It remains, the paper argues, very import-driven. Equipment, consultants, everything comes from outside.
Keeping Africa as a consumer, not a producer, in the green transition.
That's the core of the neo-colonial critique here. Africa remains a passive recipient rather than becoming a self-reliant player, building its own energy future, using its own resources. So just to kind of pull that together, the main critique from this analysis is that Mission 300, whatever its stated intentions, might actually lock in debt and underdevelopment.
Because it's market-based, loan-heavy, relies on imports.
Exactly. Instead of really focusing on building up Africa's own ability to manufacture, install, and manage clean energy, it lacks that investment in local industry, in tech transfer.
So where does that leave us? What does the paper suggest is the alternative path?
It makes a pretty powerful case that a genuinely just developmental clean energy transition needs to look different.
More than just connections.
Much more. It calls for real support, think grants, or loans that are highly concessionary, basically almost free money. Also, debt cancellation is mentioned.
And structurally, how should it be organized?
The paper argues strongly for state-led, people-centered development, prioritizing regional cooperation to build, industrial hubs, real technology acquisition.
Empowering the continent to build its own renewable future, essentially, not just import it.
Precisely. That's the fundamental shift being called for. And, this whole discussion really leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? For you listening, too.
Which is?
In this global push for clean energy, which is vital, right, with climate change, how do we actually make sure these big international initiatives genuinely lift communities up?
And foster that self-reliance we talked about.
Instead of maybe inadvertently just creating new ways for countries to become dependent. That's something we all need to think about.